Hi, my name is Jaycee, and welcome to my newest episode of ENTP Time. Today, as you can tell by the title, I'm assuming, we're going to be talking about introverted feeling, which is one of the judging functions. Introverted feeling, or FI, is an introverted feeling, like I just said, so it has more depth rather than breadth, and it's also a subjective function rather than an objective function. Just to dive right in, I guess as an ENTP, FI is actually the ultimate lowest function on my stack because first of all, I don't value it. It's not in my valued stack, and in my unvalued stack, it's like the last function. So as far as my personal experiences of me going through FI things, there isn't a lot of that except for me not measuring up to how good I could do FI or someone else could do FI. But I do have a lot of experience with FI in that my mom is an INFP, so her first function is FI, and my sister is an ENFP, and her auxiliary function is FI. I also have collected a lot of FI users throughout my life, and right now one of my best friends, he's also an INFP, so his first function is also FI, and I have an ISFP best friend, so there are a lot of FI users in my life. So I guess to go into it, I first wanted to contrast it, I guess, with introverted thinking, since that is a function that I possess, and they're both internal judging functions. So the way that I described TI, or the introverted thinking, in my previous videos is that TI kind of works with my SI at least, is with my NE, I collect things and perceive and I'm collecting information, and then my TI goes through and judges and decides what to do with it, and it stores it in my SI. So for me, if something has happened before in the past, and I've thought certain thoughts in the past, and something happens in the present, and it reminds me of something in the past, then I can easily connect it in my head. And I think that contrasts with the way that FI would work, in that when I've talked to high FI users, they've described it as if they are going through a situation, we're going through a situation, and they can immediately identify previous moments in their life where they've gone through the exact same situation, and they know immediately how they are supposed to feel and how they feel, which to me is kind of crazy because I think that FI users always know how they feel, and they always say that you always are feeling something. I think I might have heard this from one of Megan Lavota's videos with Crystal before, where they were saying thinkers might say I don't feel anything right now, but feelers will say no, that is your feeling, and then feelers might say oh, I'm not thinking anything right now, and thinkers will be no, that's you thinking nothing or whatever. So it's a state of being for the different types, I guess. And something that I noticed from a lot of FI users is they're really good at identifying how they feel, but they're not necessarily good at trying to justify it for themselves, or they find a need to justify it for themselves. So as far as my INFP best friend goes, he's always he feels certain ways and he knows exactly how he feels, but he brings it to me and he's I shouldn't be feeling this way, right? I shouldn't be feeling this way, right? And I think the most valuable thing you could do for a high FI user in those situations is to tell them no matter what, your feelings are valid. Even if logically you realize that it doesn't necessarily make sense, or you can't always rationalize everything, your feelings are always valid. It doesn't matter if if you're upset about something and you can't change it, you're still allowed to be upset about it, you're allowed to feel the way that you feel. So I feel that's just something that's important to remind the FI users around you about. I also find that at least for me, I'm really bad at having FI conversations. So if someone texts me hey, can we talk? And I'm sure everyone gets this, you get that dread of what did I do? But especially as an ENTP, with FI being in my polar spot, I don't know how to deal with emotional confrontation. So if immediately you bring it up to me and we just talk right away, I'm kind of fine, I could roll with it. But if you give me time to think about it and try to actually reflect on how I may have hurt your feelings, I don't know how to cope with that, and I'll probably number one, not answer you. Number two, if I do answer you, it'll be really hard for me. So that's just something that to keep in mind as an FI user. Also, if you want to interact with a high TI user or an EXTP or whatever, and you just want to interact and if you want to connect with that polar FI, you just gotta like do it right away. You don't want them to dwell on it, because especially I think the EXTP types, like it's really hard for them, us, to like deal with that kind of stuff, honestly. And that also leads me into thinking about like the way that FI and TI users get along. I tend to see that like TI users are really obsessed with precision and accuracy, but like for the FI user, that's not what's important, because if you have FI, it's paired with TE, and TE just cares about getting things like done like effectively, like, and like a lot of TE users obviously are very careful and whatever, but like it's not so much about every single little thing being correct and precise. It's more about just like, do we have enough to get it done, right? So FI being paired with that's like a big part of that, compared to TI, where we're like, but like this little detail is not actually correct, and like trying to like resolve those differences is pretty important. And I think that the way that the TI user could try to reconcile that is, the TI user should be like, okay, well, if we're getting like, try to take a step back and look at the big picture. We're like, if the big picture thing is getting done, then this little minute detail shouldn't really matter so much. And for the FI user or the TE user, whatever, they could realize that, hey, maybe sometimes you do need to pay attention a little bit and zone in and figure out the little kinks and the little details, because otherwise, things can fall apart. So this just aspect of like the two coming together to work. I honestly do find that a lot of like TI FI pairings do work pretty well. So I mean, which makes sense. All types, I believe, can get along. So I mean, yeah. Also, I do find that like FI is honestly like almost like magic, because a lot of people talk about like FE being able to identify how other people are kind of feeling, but like I really think that FI can do the same thing except within themselves. And I described that really badly, I know that, but it would be, for example, like let's say I go through something hard, right? I go to my FI user friend and I say, hey, like this thing just happened, and him looking at his own life and like his own experiences knows that how he felt in that moment and how like someone should feel in that moment. So he tells me, hey, do you feel this way? And then I can actually look and be like, do I feel that way? And then I can like check, because otherwise I don't really know, because I don't have like a good standpoint to begin with of like where I think that I should be or like what I should feel. So I think that FI is really cool in that like they can really easily identify like the things that they have gone through in others. And I honestly like think that they're really good at like empathizing with other people, and they could really put themselves in other people's shoes, which I think is really cool. Yeah, so in other videos I'll go more in depth into each type, I believe, and into intertype relations, but that's like all I got for today for this FI video. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in my next one.